Harry, please join us.
Sure.
Thank you for coming this morning, sharing your life experience.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Clark, for that introduction. And I don't know if I'm a renowned speaker or not, but I'm very pleased to be here this morning. It's to me a glorious day, the day after we've had a little rainfall. I have a grandfather. My grandfather used to say that people complain about the rain, but he used to always say that God gives us rain so that green spaces, so that when we thirst we might drink, so that green spaces will grow, so that we hunger we might eat. So rain's a good thing. I want you to take an opportunity today to share my personal story of how I believe cancer has cured my soul and restored my soul. But I want to begin with a few quotes. First from Psalms 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And this from Isaiah 41, the 10th and the 13th verse. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. For I, the Lord your God, will hold your right hand, saying to you, fear not, I will help you. And this from the 16th century cleric, Brother Lawrence, as chronicled in the book, The Practice of the Presence of God. He wrote, do not completely rely on another physician, because God reserves your cure to himself. Put all your trust in God. You will soon find the effects in your recovery, which we often delay by putting greater faith in medicine than in God. Whatever remedies you use, they will succeed only so far as he permits. When pain comes from God, only he can ultimately cure them. Listen to this. He often sends sickness to the body to cure the diseases of the soul. Comfort yourself with a sovereign physician of body and soul. End quote. For those of you who know me, have heard me say that the diagnosis of cancer has changed my life for the better. It's an odd thing to say, isn't it? It has transformed me spiritually and personally. Personally, I feel fresh. I'm able to go about my days without disruption, without stress in my life, without stressing my body, in spite of this noise that swirls around me as I conduct the businesses of the county. The shepherd has restored my soul. Spiritually, before the diagnosis, I was a faith liar. I wasn't attending church with regularity, but was out on the golf course Sunday mornings betting Rodney Monroe $5 Nassau's. and he's a great golfer, and paying him more times than not. I was not reading the scripture with regularity, but most of all, I was not praying with regularity. I was not waking up in the morning and giving thanks for the blessings that I have. And since I've had this diagnosis, I count my blessings now and not my troubles, because I know that the blessings of life are far greater than any troubles that are perceived or factual. Cancer has changed me in how I view the world and how I treat those I come into contact with. I just give you a good example. As I leave my office sometimes and walk downtown, I never noticed before the beauty of some of the water fountains that are attached to these large buildings downtown. But one day I was walking down 4th Street and I looked over and I saw this nice landscape water fountain with benches. And I paused for a moment and I went over and I just sat for about 5 minutes and experienced the calming effect of the gurgle of that water. Normally, I was just in a hurry to get to where I needed to get to without observing the beauty that surround me. My pace, which was a quick pace before, has slowed substantially. I pay more attention to what my wife has to say, what my grandkids have to say. I look them in the eye because I know that the day that I have is a blessing from God. And I am extremely grateful each and every day that I wake up to have the blood that flows through my veins, the oxygen in my lungs, and the life that I have. And oftentimes we take just waking up in the morning for granted. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I do not. When I got diagnosed with cancer, the easy thing for me to do is to say, why me? That is not the question that I ask in the morning. The question that I have now is, why are you sparing me, Lord? And what is it that I can do to your glory? Over the course of the past 13 months, there have been a number of things that have happened to me that I call my transformational moments. And let me just spend a little time talking to you about them. Transformational moment number 1 is a diagnosis of cancer. I was diagnosed back in December of 2011. I was told of the diagnosis on December the 21st. But about 7 or 8 months before, I began to experience some discomfort. And I thought I had acid reflux, just pain right in here. And as I would come to the Y, I would work out and I'd go down and get in that whirlpool and I'd let that whirlpool just kind of beat on me. I didn't know what was going on. My doctor thought I might have had we thought it was acid reflux. So he subscribed protonics and I was taking those kinds of things. We worked on my diet. To fast forward to December the 9th, I called my doctor up one night, had a cell phone. I said, I need to see you this week. He had me to come in on Friday morning, December the 9th. And I was very indignant. I said, it's my insurance, but I want a test today. Something is going on inside my body, and I want a test today. And even if insurance denies this test, I'm willing to mortgage my house to find out what's going on inside of me because I know my body. Well, that night at 6 o'clock, I was at CMC Pineville, and I got an abdominal scan. And back in my doctor's office that following Monday morning, told me I had a mass on my pancreas. The good news was out on the tail, didn't know if it was malignant. 9 times out of 10, it would be malignant. From there, he sent me to a gastrointestinal doctor, and that Wednesday, she got me some tests done the following week, December the 19th, I can remember. Sent me to Presbyterian to get a CAT scan, and then 2 days later, I went back to see him, to Caroline's healthcare system, for an endoscopic ultrasound where the determination was made that I had stage 4 pancreatic cancer that had metastasized to my liver. Little did I know that the doctor who had performed the biopsy had told my wife that she needed and we needed to be preparing for my death that I did not have long. My wife didn't tell me that for 3 months. She didn't want me to know that because she said to me later, I knew, Harry, the fight in you. And I didn't want you to have that in the back of your mind that this doctor said, even though he didn't give a deadline, that you didn't have that much time. The next day was December the 22nd. The same doctor who had told my wife that had referred us to an oncologist, and we went to this oncologist. His words to me, our worst suspicions have been confirmed. You have pancreatic cancer. It is not, it's only treatable, it's not curable. Focal treatment is not an option. Focal means you can't use radiation or surgery. The good news is your gallbladder, spleen, kidneys, and lungs are all clear. You have a very strong body. We think that we will give you, what we would propose for you is a cocktail of chemotherapy. It's very toxic. It may put you down for a while. You may want to start talking to your HR staff and others about some temporary disability. And that was on December the 22nd. But there's something that he said to me that was far more powerful than what he felt were the strategies and other options that I could pursue. What he said to me was something that you don't hear doctors say. He says, I can provide you the treatment, but your real cure is going to come from God. The doctor said that to me. He says, and your faith will carry you through this. Here's a man who was encouraging us to get another opinion. But my wife and my twin daughters were there with me when we asked the doctor to leave the room for a moment. And we unanimously concluded that this was a man that we wanted to be our doctor here on earth. So the next day, this is all transformational moment. The next day is December 23rd. I made a 100-mile trip down to Moore County to tell my mother and mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sisters. We had a caravan going down. Family members followed me. My mother's brother, 90-year-old brother, was in the backseat of the car with his daughter. My uncle lives here 7 months out of the year. We went there, and I can remember something, and this is what's transformational about this day. My sister's a very devout Christian. After we had said prayer, after I told my mother, we had gathered in the den. My sister said something to me, and she said, Harry, look at me. I see a very healthy person standing here. Don't you declare any sickness. She said, if you declare anything, declare that you are healed in the name of Jesus. And then she said, look at me. She said, Harry, you just can't say it. You have to believe it. And as I drove back to Charlotte, in my mind, the words, you have to believe, you have to believe, you have to believe, resonated over and over again. Just played in my subconscious mind, you have to believe. Transformational moment. I just read to you about belief. Let me tell you how that plays out on the second transformational moment. It was December the 24th, the next day. I'm a creature of habit. I got up and I went to South Park Mall to buy my wife's Christmas present. She takes care of everything else. I only have to buy one Christmas present, and that's hers. Well, I always go to a jewelry counter in some store out there, and I know I can't ever go wrong buying my wife jewelry. She says I bought her a present. I don't really remember. She says I gave her a present. I don't really remember. But what started out as the worst day of my life turned into the best day of my life. And let me tell you why. After I bought that present, I went and sat on a bench. It was a nice warm day. And I had tears streaming down my face, believing that this was going to be my last Christmas of December of 2011 was going to be my last Christmas with my family. And what started out as the worst day of my life ended up being the best day of my life, because later that day, I was walking my dog, listening to my iPod, listening to Aretha Franklin sing Christmas carols. And I was thinking about whether or not I should retire or whether or not I should continue, and what the financial benefit of doing either one would be to my family. And I concluded that in any scenario, that my family financially was going to be able to take care of themselves. My wife was going to be taken care of. But as I was walking the dog, here's what happened. Some years ago, when I was a young man, I memorized a verse after I'd heard a sermon in our church in Southern Pines. It comes in the book of Mark, 11th chapter, 22nd verse. And as I was walking my dog, thinking about my own mortality. Just out of the blue. I don't know where it came from, except I know it came from God. I do know where it came from. Mark 11:22 says, have faith in God. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, cancer, be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, get out of my body, and whosoever believes in his heart, there's that word believe again, and shall not doubt, shall have whatsoever he asks for, and when you pray, if you believe that you receive it, then it shall be yours. I started saying that scripture out loud over and over again. And so what started out as the worst day of my life ended up being the best day of my life. And that night at our home on Christmas Eve, the kids come over, the grandkids come over, and we hold talent shows. And my wife and I put on the wigs, and we get out in front and we do videos, and she and I were singing Donny Hathaway's This Christmas, and the grandkids was having a good time. Ended up being the best day of my life. Transformational moment number 2. Transformational moment number 3 occurred on December the 28th. I went on December the 27th, called some staff in, we were on vacation. The 26th and 27th were holidays because of Christmas season. But I called staff in on that day and I said, here are 2 things I want you to do. I need to send 2 messages out, one to the commissioners and one to staff. We did a video for the staff. We programmed it to go out at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning. By noon that day, Bishop George Battle had called me. Bishop George Battle told me to read Psalms 139 every day. That day then, I read Psalms 139 probably 5 or 6 times, trying to get an understanding of its meaning. I'd never made a conscious effort to memorize any of the lines in Psalms 139, but that night, as I slept, tossing and turning all night long, the last 2 verses of Psalms 139 played over and over again in my subconscious mind. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxieties. And if there's any wickedness within me, lead me in the way everlasting. I never made a conscious effort to memorize any of those verses. I woke up the next morning and told my wife that I was healed. Transformational moment number 4 occurred on the first day of the year. New Year's Day was a Sunday. Got up and said, where are we going to go to church today? My daughter's a member of Little Rock Amy Zion Church. Let's go to church with our daughter. Walked to church. I got to church, walked in there, sat down. The associate pastor stood up a few minutes later, and she read from John 5. John 5 is the story of the healing pool at Bethesda around the sheep gate. And then she read it. The story goes like this. Around this pool, the angel comes and picks you up and puts you in the swirling water, disrupts the water. It's a whirlpool, and it's a healing pool. And the story goes, if you read John 5, of a man who had been there, who was a very lame man, very weak, had been there for 38 years. And Jesus went to this man and asked this man if he wanted to be healed, and he replied to Jesus that he was so weak and lame that he's cast aside and he can't get into the swirling waters. And Jesus said to him, pick up your mat and walk. My wife and I looked at each other, and she said, we were meant to be here. And then the pastor, Reverend Dwayne Walker, Dr. Dwayne Walker, preached a sermon entitled, I'm going to get up from here. And it was a sermon in tribute to his wife. His wife had been diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and she had fallen the week before, and she had fractured her femur bone in her leg. I'm going to get up from here. Transformational moment. Pick up your mat and walk. and I'm going to get up from here. I'm not going to allow what's going on inside my body to affect me. The next transformational moment was working through with my wife and even working through with my doctor, who was discouraging me to do this. But I made a late night phone call to Congresswoman Sue Myrick. I had her cell phone. Called her about 10 o'clock at night on the way from a Board of County Commissioners meeting and asked her about her experience in going public when she had been diagnosed 15 or 16 years ago with breast cancer. We talked it through, and she said, Harry, I'm going to encourage you to go public. She says, in spite of all this stuff that swirls around you, you're a very well respected man in this community, very broadly respected. And she said, but it will help you in your healing, and given the position that you have, you will be able to help other people and give other people hope. Her encouragement to go public has led to me speaking to groups like this. It's transformational in the sense that I know that God is using me in a way to spread the message of hope as a result of me going public. It's helped me understand that a young man who sees me in the voting booth stands outside by virtue of me going public and waits for me to come out and says later to me that you don't know what you have done by going public, but as a result of you going public, I have gone to my doctor because I was experiencing some problems. And as I went through and got the test came back that there's no problem that I have, but I would not have done that. I mean, it's just a story of me just being able to help other people. I've probably spoken since April or May to more than 2,000 people, kind of sharing my story about how I have dealt with and tried to conquer this ravaging disease. It's a story of a senator named Richard Stevens, who was my classmate in Chapel Hill, who later became the Wake County manager and who became a state senator, called me in April and says, I know you're doing so well with your diagnosis. Will you please call a friend of ours? His name is Senator Jones from down in Enfield, North Carolina. He was diagnosed with cancer, pancreatic cancer today. Can you call him? I called him that night. We talked for an hour. Never met the man in the flesh. He passed on this December. But he and I talked just about every Sunday afternoon. It was a relationship, I guess, was made in heaven. It really, it's a story of a prominent businessman in this town calling me to reach out to me and to say, you're my hero. Here's what I need. I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Can you have lunch with me? It's a story of a retired city manager from the eastern part of the state driving from Raleigh, North Carolina, here to spend 45 minutes with me at lunch to receive hope from me. Why are you using me, God? Why are you sparing me? And what is it that you want me to do to your glory? There are the transformational moments. Probably none more significant than what Neil Cooksey did. County Commissioner Neil Cooksey passed away to this disease back in September. Neil Cooksey was admitted to hospice in late June of last year. On July the 3rd, Neil came to Board of County Commissioners meeting. And he came to do a couple things. He said, I've come tonight to tell you goodbye, even though he did make the August meeting. He said, I also have come to say that I understand the differences between the ways of science and the ways of faith. And I come to implore you to side on the ways of faith. I come to implore you to be a little bit more genteel and civil in your discourse. And here's this conservative Republican who says, I come to say to you that you need to be doing more for the needy and downtrodden in your community. But you think about that. He had been admitted to hospice several weeks earlier. His deathbed, if you want to think about it symbolically, he arose from his deathbed and he came to the center of where the people are represented in this community. And he implored his fellow colleagues to be Jesus-like. But he got up from his deathbed. He did not wallow in his pity. You see, my point there is why it's so transformational, because that was one of the most courageous things I have ever seen anybody in my life do. He got up, he picked up his mat, and he walked downtown. Think, ladies and gentlemen, every day about the things that you are critical of and that you complain about. Here's a man had been told 2 weeks earlier by earthly doctors, we have done all that we can do for you. And he never gave up. For me, that's one of the most transformational things that I've ever experienced, and one of the most courageous things and acts that I have ever experienced. I want to leave you with this thought. We will all experience troubles in our life. We will all endure some form of suffering. You have to understand that suffering is universal. It comes in various forms. It could be the cancer that's in my body. It could be a divorce. It could be a death of a loved one. But we all are going to experience suffering of some type. Suffering occurred on the cross on Calvary's Hill. Indexed of our resurrection, index of our life is the blood that was shed there, so that we might have everlasting life. I tell people all the time that the cross comes before the coronation. My transformation has been, I can't start a day, and I've already done my devotional for the day. I cannot start a day without getting up, looking up, and saying thank you. And what is it that you want me to do today? Jim Valvano said that cancer may destroy me physically, but it will never destroy my mind, my heart, and my soul. Well, like Jim Valvano, my soul has been restored. Cancer is not going to destroy my soul either. I'm going to ask each of you, as you leave this place, to take stock on how you're living your life, and take stock on and ask yourself the question, what is it that you can do to the glory of God? I want to thank all of you for taking time out to be here this morning. I'm a better person having gone through what I am going through. Let me just say this one last thing, because somebody may ask me the question how I'm doing. When I started out on this treatment on January the 3rd of this year, of last year, remember I said I was healed before I started the treatment. There's a measure of that doctors use to determine how well treatment is doing. It's called a tumor marker test. My tumor marker, when I started on January 3rd, was 92. That doesn't mean anything to you. The normal range would be 0 to 35. So I was way outside the range. I didn't know what it meant. 6 weeks into treatment, my wife gets a call at home and says, the doctors are very ecstatic, your tumor marker number is 17. Well, I didn't know what it meant. I said, well, what does that mean? She says, well, the normal range is 0 to 35. 2 weeks later, my tumor marker number went to 9. 2 weeks later, my tumor marker number went to 7. 2 weeks later, it went to 4. 2 weeks later, it went to 2. 2 weeks later, it went to less than 1. About a month ago, it went to 1. It went from less than 1 up to 1, and then it went up to 2, so the nurses and I were joking with each other, said, doggone, my tumor marker number's doubled. But bottom line is, it's back to less than 1, which means that the treatment is doing exactly what it should do. As a person with pancreatic cancer, if you know many people who have had it, they look emaciated after about 4 or 5 months. I haven't lost any weight. I weigh as much today as I did when I first got diagnosed with it. I still come to the Y. I'm still doing 50 to 60, 70 push-ups a day. I'm skipping rope, riding bikes. So my life hasn't been altered. I am doing quite well. I don't know what tomorrow holds for me. This is a cantankerous disease, and it could turn on a moment. But yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, because I know who's got their right hand on me. Thank you so much for listening.
Do you want to answer any questions?
I will if they want to.
We got about 5 to 10 more minutes. If you would like to ask Terry any
Thank y'all.
questions, we'll be glad to take those questions and try and answer.